speech and open this debate.
So, we live in the age where media is available to everyone. On the first look, it's a great thing. We can all get the information we need. But on the second look, it has this really big problem. And that is that the media wants to sell. They want to sell at any cost. And what story sells? The story that gets the most attention. And the stories that get the most attention are the shocking stories. So in the end, we have media who do not want to tell us the true information, but who want to shock us, who want to get our attention, to grasp us, to get us to read them as much as we can. And we see this as a problem, and we see this as something that we have to limit in situations where we are dealing with terrorism. When we're dealing with such a horrible thing that on its own spreads fear and terror amongst people, and we do not need and we cannot have media enhancing this. So what we propose today is the limiting of media. So basically we're going to allow the basic information being available in the ether, but there will be no images, no videos, no sensational coverage of stories, no vivid depiction, no vivid explanations.
So if something like 9/11 would happen again, you would show no pictures or video.
Yes, we would show no pictures or video. We would say it happened. We would keep the people informed, but no graphical report. Okay. So basically, what happens when you do have images, when you do have videos, when people are submitted to all of this. So, people are very irrational. Once you see a decapitation live on TV, in a video, you never get that out of your head. Every time you think of terrorism, every time you hear a story, every time you see something happening, you're going to get that little flash of a man dying in front of your eyes. You're going to get that little flash of people being tortured, of people being terrorized. And we believe this is a really big problem, because every time you're asked about terrorism, every time you have something to say, and you as a people of a state have a lot to say, actually, because you're the ones who are choosing your electives. You're the one who is making all the decisions when asked. You're the one who is putting pressure on your government whenever there is a crisis. Because of all of this, once you have this irrational image in your head, every time you have to decide, you first think of a guy being decapitated, and then actually start thinking about the whole problem and about the whole story. At that moment, you become even more irrational in a thing that is really difficult to be rational in. And at that moment, you do not think, you react emotionally, because you're frightened. So basically, what happens is that if we have a hostage situation, if we have a problem where our state has to react, state cannot react in a good manner, because it has its body, its people frightened to death, wanting it to react in a proper way. And because there is no real proper way in every terrorist situation, people are never going to be satisfied. And when they're not satisfied, they do not believe in their state. They do not feel safe in their own state. And we see this as a huge problem, because then state cannot react in the proper way, people are frightened and see no way out, and then they resolve to extremism. In a minute, sorry. So what then happens? You kind of tend to generalize the story, because you've heard one really vivid depiction of a terrorist act, and you've heard, for example, that it was part of a Muslim organization, a person from a Muslim organization who has done it. And whether you like it or not, every next time you see a Muslim person, this little information is going to go through your head that it was a part of that religion, or part of any other religion in a different terrorist act. And you're going to, whether you like it or not, you're going to tend to stereotype, to make stereotypes, because it is just something that is natural that is something that is in human nature. Because you have been frightened, you connect these two things. You connect, okay, they have these two things in common, and that way we're actually limiting the tolerance, limiting the okay, before I go closing.
But if we're still talking about the same thing, and we still state that someone from ISIS killed someone, you'll still have that link. Either you're going to withhold information about the fact that someone from the Muslim state did this, or are you only going to withhold?
We're not going to withhold information, but still it's going to be more plain, it's going to be more simple. And it is different, it is really different, because when you just have that information, when you have this whole image, this whole story that media has planted to you, this shocking story that has to shock you instead of like 2 paragraphs of what actually happened, you have a lot more motivation to hate this group of people and to generalize them and to connect them with all the other groups in your society that relate to these people in any way. And when you do that, you're less likely to tolerate these people because you will be more frightened. And then we have a society where we have division of groups. We have, even though a lot of Muslims are actually going out and declaring themselves as against ISIS, as against other Muslim terrorist organizations, you still have a lot of hatred towards them because those small things do not like stay in your head. The only thing that stays in your head, there was a Muslim guy, he killed a guy from my state, and I'm gonna be frightened. And also what it does that is really bad is that it actually helps the terrorists spread their message. Because as long as they want to spread terror, media is helping them do that. Media is helping them be there and be in frightening people. So we get like 2 groups in the society. We get a group that is scared to that doesn't know how to react, and that is going to act irrationally. We also get this group that we believe is important, who actually gets a chance to identify with these terrorists, who gets a chance to see them as someone who is stronger than your state, as someone who is stronger than your system, and then we honestly believe that there are going to be people who are going to be more likely to actually join them or actually to go to that side because they have seen their power, they have seen what they can do because, hey, look, every media is showing me what they have done and no one has stopped them. My state hasn't stopped them. And if my state hasn't stopped them, who can stop them? And in that moment, I am more likely to either be scared to that and do not believe in my state, or go there and join the stronger side because, hey, I want to be on the winner side. So because we believe that we are already emotional enough in stories like this, and because we believe that the last thing we need is spreading even more terror, we beg you to propose.
We thank the speaker for the final remarks, and now we give the floor to the first leader of the opposition. Here.
Madam Speaker, we find the proposition extremely soft in that what they're doing is not actually what they set out to do us in the motion. To limit media reporting is to have a limitation on the specific content being reported. Now they're fully reporting everything. They are giving us, as they say, all the words and full content of everything they're talking about. It's just that specifically they don't want images and video. Now we find that reporting is virtually exactly the same, and that of the things they limit, gore is already banned on television. You can't show gore on the televisions that they can limit already, so what they're doing is very, very narrow. They would not show 9/11 is what it comes down to, but they would tell you all about 9/11, and we think that essentially leaves you with no relevant effects, but lots and lots of harm that we're going to talk about. Now, first thing first, they tell us this idea that what they are correct about, what they're fully correct about, is that indeed, for humans to react to things, for humans to truly have interior understanding of something, an actualized understanding of something, emotion has to come with reason. Indeed, we truly care about something, we truly understand something when we have an emotional story attached to it, because that is the reality we're used to perceiving. In real life, we perceive things with reasoning attached to the emotional understanding of a story. That's how we're made to understand reality around us. Now, when you give us pure information without the true imagery of what is going on, without the story attached that comes through things like video and imagery and the actual narrative of what a decapitation is and how blood comes spurting out when you take a life because you wanted to get a political message out, that is the sort of thing that makes us understand the story and what these people are willing to do and why we need to react to it. So they're correct about one thing, that indeed people will treat terrorism as important as you let them also get the emotional information that comes through these sort of things. So essentially the question before the House is, do we want people to think terrorism is a big deal? Do we want people to think terrorism is important? Or do we want to stay calm because they're just a head count, we announced the head count, we announced that Muslims did it and that's somehow not generalizing, and we are fine and everything is good because it's governed. Now, we have to look at the question of what the fundamental reasoning is, right? Let's not have people be scared. Let's not let them be scared. We think essentially that people in lots of these cases should be scared, that it's a constructive social reaction to be scared and to react upon that fear, because there are people decapitating your citizenry abroad. There are people flying planes into your buildings, and you should know that, react to that. It is your freedom as a citizen to find out, and to find out that they're jumping out the damn window to kill themselves so that they don't burn on the inside. We think you should see that. We think that was caused on your soil, and you should see that, and you should evaluate it emotionally, rationally, and react to it. We don't see why you wouldn't show it go.
Please tell me, how will the people react? Instead of, like...
Right, people react like whenever they see any information, right? When they hear there's an aviary flu, sure, some people will overreact. Most people will have an informed context that they know about. Most people will have a position. You have violence like in Donetsk, right? And we see that, and that's like, maybe it's not scary to you know, the US, but it's damn scary for Romanians, right? We want to see what is happening in Donetsk. We want to hear the story from there, and know the fact that some people will be scared does not mean we should not get that information. So what is the specific distinction, right, between a situation like Ukraine and a situation that is terrorism? What is the specific difference between these two things? Because we're saying that whenever people are causing horrendous acts, it's our freedom to know about them in their exact form. Now, specifically, we have to understand why imagery is important, and video and all that. Is because it tells the full story. Because they're saying, just announce the facts of the situation. And that's actually highly misleading to how humans work. When humans hear facts, first of all, they downplay the importance of what's going on. They don't understand the context. They're saying, just give the information itself. But we're saying contextualization is best served through exactly showing context, with reporting, with imagery, with interviews, with stories, with video. Because we don't want the blind facts to go out there. We want them to be contextualized in a full report that includes video and imagery, not just somebody talking to the TV off of a piece of paper saying there were 5 decapitations by Muslim fundamentalists in this place at this time, and that is the story. No, we want proper contextualization with video, with what is available, because we are entitled to that truth. We cannot react as citizens politically. We can't tell our politicians how we want them to react to this if we don't know what happened. If they want us calm, not knowing the truth, so that we can't react. Our only fair democratic reaction is when we know what actually happened, and anything else is lying to us. Now, no. What we need to look at, and what opposition will be explained today, is that we have a clash of civilization. Terrorism is just a symptom of that. It's a culture that is feeling layers, various complicated layers of cultures, feeling dominated by a different Western dominating culture, reacting in a civilizational guerrilla context in order to strike back and get their message out. And their message is that the West is no different. The West will shut you up if it wants to shut you up. Their politicians are not different than our politicians. They will limit your freedom the moment they're upset. And we're lending credence to that. We're giving them that victory. We're showing that, yes, we, the West, limit all of that whenever we want our citizens to be calm and not know the truth. We can't tell Jack to Erdogan when we want them to say, no, leave the press alone. Leave the press alone. You're not letting them see what is going on around the world. Why should I ever leave the press alone? How dares the West tell me something like that? We see that essentially the terrorist strategy is to use Western freedoms and show that they are excessive, and through terrorism to have them limited. And we can't grant them another victory. To say, look, we, the terrorists, have made them cut off some of their media reporting, we have cut off some of their truth, we lend them that victory, we give them all of that. You will end up having to arrest your own. You will have to end up going on the internet. How are you going to stop internet vice news reporting with your motion? And what are you going to do to do that? Are you going to start clamping down on the internet to keep people calm? People should be afraid about certain things. People should have an evaluation of what they should be afraid about, and people should have a fair reaction. Because if I don't know the facts of 9/11, that the fact that somebody jumped off a window is factual, then I cannot make an informed decision. And I have alternate media sources from which I can get perfectly well-framed information. I can get facts, I can get video. I need to have all that to have a proper informed decision as a citizen. The media has the freedom to admit all that, if we can start conceding this, if whenever we want our citizens to be calm and not to overreact and not to make their own decisions, we'll make for decision for it. We have decided for you that you should be this scared, you're being too scared, we will not tell you that much truth because we, the state, have decided you're being too scared by the truth, then we have failed, we have lost, Western freedom stops.
Remarks, and now we give the floor to the second member of the first opposition. Here.
Thanks for the floor. So basically what we heard from the first opposition was that now we're going to cut off people's information, etc., etc. And they tried to give us a comparative that without showing sensationalistic articles, sensationalistic titles, without showing photos and videos of some terrible things, that people will not be provided by full information. And the comparative they try to make is that now they will not be able to get the full info because they will not be able to have the proper emotional reaction. Well, it might be true that we are not going to allow people to have the same emotional reaction as they would have in the status quo. But we do not see any clear benefit that the opposition has presented us from me being scared, frightened, aggressive, or any other like emotion that goes through that goes after these things. So now I'm going to explain you how media works and how people react to media and how they react to such reports. So basically, when they yes.
But when would you feel more afraid? When you hear, you live in Boston, here there was a bombing, and the media doesn't report the images of this, and you see those images online and you have no verification which of that is true, and it's even more exaggerated.
Well, yeah, but it is not like media is not going to report true. They're going to say, okay, there was a terrorist attack in Boston, but it's like not so many people are going to search on the internet, hey, there was a terrorist attack in Boston, hey, let's search the decapitation in Syria. It's like, when we have media that we cannot control, certainly we cannot control internet, we can control TV, we can control newspapers, etc., etc. A lot more people use that kind of media than the internet, so please. So basically, when we have this kind of fear, it provides a lot of new harms that can lead to new harms in our lives. So basically, when we're afraid, we often tend to react aggressively. To act aggressively because we fear that, for example, our nation is like in great danger. So, for example, what happened in Iraq is that many people went there, and what happened, because they were like, oh, the evil terrorists, the evil dictators, etc., etc. And when a lot of American soldiers went to Iraq, they realized that they cannot really hold this really tough thing to go to war. And then they quit and they went back, and what happens? They lose like their pensions, they lose like their health insurance, etc., etc., etc. All because they were motivated with this enormous emotion of fear and this aggressiveness that came out from media reporting this terrible sensationalistic stuff. But if we provide them with information, it just cuts the space that media can provide. Yes, we are going to provide information. We are going to say, okay, we had a crash, we had a fighting with Kurds, so that many people died, etc., etc. But once you see the picture and once you see that some kind of terrible subtitle, you tend to act quite differently because it is quite shocking. Like when we say that we generalize by showing this emotional content. Oh, thank you. When we show this emotional content, it is very different if we have plain article that spread the info and if we have like some videos, photos, sensationalism and so on. Because now when we actually see, we act more emotionally and we have to generalize identities. When we hear or when we see that something terrible happened in Iraq or Syria, the most dominant identities of those people who live there in the public discourse is they're Muslims. Once you get emotionally attached to these things, you're a lot more prone to generalize Muslims and to spread stereotypes and to spread hatred among them than when you just see the text in the article. You know, people usually do not read full articles. They like to see picture. Like, okay, it's very easy to click and to see video, but it is a lot tougher to to read full story and to see what actually happened. If we do this, we're going to simply to make people who want to be provided by the information to actually read stuff, except just see terrible photos, terrible videos, or reading an article like, oh, Muslims are invading Europe, like, yeah, armies of Rome, we go to West, now ISIS is going to crush all over like Europe and Asia and fuck up the USA, etc., etc. So we're going to make people to actually look more realistic, because we're going to cut off media space that presents this that presents this kind of emotions. Yes, sir. Okay.
But even if, like, what you'll create is that when you'll have just like pure information, massive social media, like speculation about what's happened, is going to promote exactly the type of panic thinking that you're talking about.
Well, not really. I really do not see how do you think that comparatively, if we have text full of information, is going to provide more panic than if we see some slaughter in Tunisia, or if we see like decapitation in Iraq. I think that actually the text does not have that ability to provide such that kind of sensationalism, because it is like consisted of data, it is consisted of numbers, it is consisted of the actual events. And we have like the full information and nothing else to it. So we cannot basically imagine new stories and tell the new things once we have texts or we have some reports which tell us what happened. But once we have videos, pictures, sensationalist titles, because people don't tend to read the whole story because it takes a lot more time, energy, people do not have that kind of stuff. And because it's a lot easier to generalize after like 2 minutes of glance on some text, we believe that in this situation it's particularly easier to spread panic, because you're aware that people do not read everything, and you're aware that you want to sell more and more papers, or you want more and more people to visit your website. So now you have images, videos, and this sensationalism. It is a lot easier to turn story the way you want, because you are aware that people do not read full story. If we propose this motion, that is not going to be possible, because once you publish some stupid text, if you want to spread the panic, you can have like the original report and say, wait, what the fuck? Like this is the report. But in status quo, if we just see the video and we are aware that like 90% of people do not do that, it is a lot easier to like change the information the way we want to sell more of our newspapers. So because we've shown you how this generalizes, how this stereotypes people, and how this provides fear that leads to aggression and a lot of other kinds, we beg you to propose.
We thank the speaker for the final remarks, and now we give the floor to the second member of the opposition, J.K.
My mother is almost 60, and when she watches TV and sees something on the news, and the news doesn't really cover the whole picture, she looks up on Google what that thing is actually about, sees more information. The point is, they have two options, right? They can either try to censor everything, which we think is horrible, we think we've given you sufficient reason to say we shouldn't censor media, like full sale, internet and TV and newspapers and so on and so forth, give you more reasons on that. But if they're going to say they're just going to censor TV and press, and like printed press, then they're just going to contribute to the decline of traditional media, like make it happen a little bit faster, because people will find all the gory information, all the detailed information, all the emotional narratives online, unless you're willing to actually go and police media outlets online like Vice News. You're not making a difference. But we're going to assume that you are making that difference, right? What we're going to tell you is that we think that this is unacceptable. Right. So they talked about Islamophobia and avoiding panic. What we say, ultimately, they're not going to avoid anything. Like, let's just imagine, like, the only report that comes out is a bomb explodes in France, 20 people are dead. Right? And you don't really know, like, or city, whatever. You don't really know anything. You don't know, like, you don't have any specific portrayal of who is involved. You don't have any specific portrayal of what actually happened. What people will naturally do is that they're going to want to know more. So what you're going to have is an explosion of social media sort of references, of social media sort of gossip about it. You're going to have people that were there that are going to post on social media, retweet, and you're going to have people retweeting, interpreting that information, and giving it all the bias they've been talking about. Look, the fact of the matter is, emotional imagery and portrayal and narratives also inform hatred, also inform bigoted people, but they also inform empathy, right? They also inform people who want to make a difference in the world. The fact that, that in the United States people know what the suffering, how it is to suffer from like a demented act of terrorism, they also empathize with the people of Syria more, or other people around the world that are suffering from the same plight. When it actually becomes something that is minimized by state propaganda, essentially, what you actually have is less empathy. You also probably have, like to some degree, people that are so ignorant that they don't even know who committed an act of terrorism, so they don't make any sort of stereotypical associations. But really, that's not what we want to do. We want to give people the possibility to be informed. But furthermore, what we think we've already shown you is that people are much more likely to actually understand when they see like this sort of narrative on TV, right? When they just hear the notion there was some Muslim extremists that did something bad, right? They just associated much clearly with like the notion of Muslim and with their Muslim neighbor. But when they can see that their Muslim neighbor is like a regular person like they are, and they can actually see that people in ISIS are crazy people that have nothing to do with that Muslim neighbor, they can actually understand that emotional narrative, how that person is fundamentally different than the other person, how those people have nothing to do with one another. Right? So what we think is that people have a we recognize that the right of people in modern society, like democratic societies, to inform their opinions and to shape their beliefs. We don't want to enforce narratives, like specific narratives about those beliefs. We think that what you're doing in a world in which you're achieving your goals is you're having a world in which you have double propaganda, right? Because you're still going to have ISIS posting videos. You're not going to be able to stop that, right? You're still going to have, to a certain degree, like them showing what decapitations, ransoms, and whatnot they want. So you're going to see their propaganda, but you're also going to see like your own state propaganda. I think that you're reinforcing, like people will be able, will feel that the state is pushing a certain narrative or trying to minimize things. We think that that sort of feeling is a feeling in which you're not really allowing people to get the full picture, not really awarding people the ability to form their own opinion about things. We think that that's exceptionally, principally wrong. We think that secondarily, even if it would be, say, principally acceptable, what we say is that it is fundamentally harmful. Why is it fundamentally harmful? Because people want to know. People are going to search it out. And there are two options. Either they're going to search it out, find it out anyway, and going to speculate more because they're not getting the picture from professional media outlets, or they're simply going to at least suspect that there's something more happening, speculate more on that, and exacerbate what's going on. What we think is fundamentally, the problem with that is, and this is where I'm turning to my point of constructive, we feel the problem with that is that we're sort of turning terrorism into a war, right? We're enfranchising this notion of otherization, right? Because essentially, what's the difference between some criminals and terrorists? The major difference is that terrorism apparently has made us change our laws. The terrorism has apparently made us curb our liberties. We think that this whole notion of the war on terror that is being portrayed, like either through restriction of liberties of citizens, either through restrictions of liberties of media, we think that this is a notion that entrenches the concept of we're at war with someone. We're at war with an entity, and an ideological entity that is distinct from us. These are the type of narratives that the United States, and especially George W. Bush, have been promoting like since 2001 onward, that have actually created the wave of Islamophobia that you're actually trying to fight against. This concept that we're fighting these people that need to have different treatment, right? Because we're not doing this about wars in general. We're not censoring what happens like in war situations. We're not censoring like criminal acts, but we are censoring terrorism, reporting on terrorism specifically, because terrorism is different. That's a narrative where we want to make sure that you have a certain type of opinion. Short closing.
Okay, so are you aware that the war on terrorism began after the 9/11 attacks, when the media speculated about Islamic terrorism and reported this in the fullest?
Right, but the problem with that is that, yes, sure, the media speculated about Islamic terrorism, and, well, to some extent, that is true, that there were terrorists that did that, right? We think that it's okay that people know the truth. What we don't think it's okay is that the government comes in and says, we're going to treat this situation differently just because it's about Islamic terrorists, right? Why? Because we want people to get a certain type of picture. I think more likely what governments want to do is to take away information because they want to take away from the acts that they commit. For instance, we say that it's a very good thing that people found out about the horrible things that US soldiers did in Iraq to prisoners, right? But I think even though some people like in the Middle East probably hate America a bit more because of that, it's still a good thing that that was found out and that was like sort of, that was dealt with. We think that that type of imagery is fine because it informs the type of empathy and reaction. We think similarly, the people in the United States should also see when their own people are being slaughtered by Islamic fundamentalists. And they should get the full picture of who's doing that and how it's not like something that happens in the Muslim world where you're never going to see pictures of, you're never going to understand how that narrative works, and you're not going to understand how there's distinctive groups that work in distinctive ways that have nothing to do with Muslim culture. Thank you.
We thank the speaker. The first half of the debate is now closed, and we summon forth the first speaker of the second government. Here.
Madam Speaker. So a couple of points of rebuttal and then on to my constructive. What we heard by now by the government was we need people to react towards terrorism. We need them to feel empathy. We need them to be emotional, and we need them to have a social outclash of hatred towards people that commit terrorism acts. And what we will give you in this debate is that no, we are trying to actually limit the amount of emotions and of hatred that is created within society when the media is actually exaggerating what is going on and is making huge headlines and stories that are often biased or that are often too general or generalize whole social groups and are often misleading towards the public. So we'll have, okay, 1 second. We're turning terrorism into a war. Well, no, actually, by limiting media coverage on terrorism acts, and we mean limiting all coverage. I mean the internet and both press and so on. By limiting it by no images and no videos and less information, just the facts, we're actually providing the state with the necessary conditions in order to deal with the situation in an effective manner. Why? Because if you have a huge media coverage, then this creates panic within society, and we already saw that. We saw that after the 9/11 terrorism attacks, we had a huge social hatred towards Islamist terrorists, and what we actually had was starting a war and starting a huge segregation within society and actually deepening all problems connected to terrorism, and actually we made the conditions for ISIS to actually to begin. Okay, so after those reports, what we had is a huge pressure on the government by its people to react in some way, because when you see the whole story, when you see that someone is dying, someone is jumping off a building, you feel empathy, yes, and you're starting to pressure your government, you're starting to pressure the people that you elected to act right now, to make quick decisions, to make the most aggressive decisions possible, because you need revenge. You know that those people are killing someone who is living in the same country as you, and you are willing to take revenge on them. And why is this bad? Because this makes the government act under pressure and actually not take the effective decision that it has to take. It makes them go into countries and actually deepen the problems and give birth to such terrorism organizations, and make a war and start a war between the two sides of the conflict. And we believe that the media isn't going to present terrorists as having some legitimate grievances, as having some reason behind what they are doing. They're just going to say that these people are killing your fellow citizens, and we don't say that terrorism is an okay thing. We're just saying that the media coverage often tells us and generalizes and says that, well, makes them believe that a whole religion is bad in itself, or that a whole group of people is bad by themselves. And then we have this generalization and actually giving legitimacy to such terrorist organizations such as ISIS. Because when you have people starting to believe that those people are evil by nature and that the whole social group is evil by nature, you actually have this us versus them narrative. You generalize and you start actually viewing the whole groups that those terrorists come from as the enemy. And then you have this hatred within society, because when you're acting on an emotional level, you're not just trying to deal with the conflict, you are willing to be aggressive towards them. You are willing to actually take a stand for your own state and show them who is more powerful. And we believe that this is a problem because it starts hatred within society, and therefore we have more people who start to believe that the West is actually their enemy and are willing to join such organizations, because we're giving legitimacy to those organizations by covering huge stories with them, and we're also telling some people that they are not a part of our society and that they are bad by nature, and therefore we're incentivizing to actually view the West as the enemy.
I'm sorry, do you think that more people join ISIS because of maybe drone strikes or because we do coverage on BBC of the ISIS beheadings?
No, what I believe is that more people will be willing to join ISIS because they will be viewed as an enemy of society. Because when the society starts to believe that your whole religion is wrong just because the media has headlines saying Islam is terrorist or Muslims behead 4 people, let's say, and have this huge coverage, then you are starting to be viewed as someone who is an enemy of society. And another thing I would like to speak of is that the government is the one that should take decisions, not being put under the huge pressure of press actually creating social outclashes. Because first of all, if it's forced to take quick decisions, we already saw that they're not the most effective and they're actually creating even further problems. And second of all, that it is chosen to make the most effective decision and therefore its citizens provide them with the opportunity to make it. And third of all, the main role of the government is to protect its citizens, no matter what. If you need to protect them by not deepening the problem with terrorists and by not actually giving them legitimacy in order to do even more terrorist attacks and giving people an incentive to join these terrorist groups, you need to protect your citizens. Therefore, you will limit the whole coverage of these stories and you will just tell them the straight facts in order not to create panic within society, in order not to create hatred, in order not to create segregation, and in order to be able to actually cope with problems in an effective manner and not being put by huge social pressure in order to act quick and actually give birth to new terrorist organizations, as we already saw with ISIS. For all these reasons, we beg you to oppose.
We thank the speaker for her remarks, and now we give the floor to the first speaker of the second opposition. Thank you.
So, we think that there are lots of benefits of showing what terrorism really is and of broad coverage of all the issues that are connected to it, which we'll try to show you. And we think that what the government trying to tell us is that we somehow influence this by by showing those people like animals and stuff like that. We think this is marginally less problematic than other failed policies of the Western governments in the Middle East, for example, and they contribute much more to people joining ISIS. If you think that it is media, then still the propaganda videos that ISIS, for example, shows are still on the internet, so there are other sources and stuff like that. We think this is really marginal. Now, what we see is a problem here. Basically, this is a form of censorship. So this opens doors to a lot of manipulation. For example, on domestic policy. This influences domestic policy in lots of ways. For example, for election campaigning. When lots of times we have these trade-offs in our head. Do we need more safety? Do we need more freedom? Stuff like that. So we think that maybe now you think that when we have all this sensationalism and stuff like that, this is really bad. But wait until we don't have the full picture, until we start to inform through social media and until the politicians, because we want to know about terrorism, because it's one of the speaker points always on every election campaign in US and stuff like that. When they start manipulating this, when we're even less informed than we are now. We think this is problematic, and we'll show you where traditional media are also better than the social media on this one too, which was somehow started on the first opposition. Now, also we see this as a problem that we see that we need a lot of transparency in our police and court systems and other stuff which deals with terrorism. For example, when we start limiting reporting, as it happened, for example, in Boston Marathon. Now, what we saw in the Boston Marathon wasn't exactly only the terrorist attack that shocked us. The other thing that shocked us was the militarization of the police. Now, wait for a second, this shows us the importance of imagery. Now, we knew that police stations are buying the old military equipment, the armored vehicles, the assault rifles and stuff like that. But no one cared before we showed the coverage of the Boston Marathon. This is exactly when conversation started about it, and this is the problem when we show that when you start censoring something, it is very hard to find the amount of where you are actually harming the society and where you're not. No, thank you, not now. Now, so we think that this can harm the general accountability of politicians because citizens are going to be less informed. Now, also it influences how we perceive our foreign policies. Now, for example, now when I see something like ISIS beheadings and stuff like that, for example, I might see the problems of the human rights stuff in those countries, and then demand as the people of this country, as the people of some civilized country, which is also more influential, has more money, more influence, stuff like that. We can demand sanctions, for example, on that country. We can demand a lot of stuff to improve the life of the people in those countries. We think this is why essentially we need to see how exactly bad are conditions there on the ground. Now, also, when we have discussions, do we need to put like boots on the ground or interventions? No, thank you, not now. This is the debate in society that goes around every intervention, and so we think this is also on which we can have the positive influence by showing everything. For example, the ISIS case. The ISIS case, what we see there is not only the beheadings. What we see there is the problem that actually showed us that our interventions before that failed utterly. So we know when we see something like that, when before that the state media were saying us, you see, we installed some kind of governments there and everything is nice and square and whatever. We believe that to some extent. But when we see the suicide bombers in Baghdad blowing up the parts of the building nearby the embassy, or the ISIS beheadings and stuff like that, we know how exactly we utterly failed, and we have no capacity of, for example, state building and stuff like that. So we see this as something that can reveal us the stuff that we're really bad at, and not only something that causes the sensationalism. Before that, yeah.
But can you explain us how these things about sanctions, police brutality and failed intervention change in a situation where we do not have so emotionally attached videos and photos in comparison?
Yeah, because we do not care that much. As I said, we knew before, we had reports where we only had like there are 300 assault rifles bought by this little police station in Boston and stuff like that, but no one really read that stuff because before we saw the videos from there. This is exactly the importance of imagery we're trying to show you. Now, this is what we're trying to show you. Now, the stuff that was touched upon on the first opposition about the social media, they recognize the importance of social media and how by enacting this censorship plan on the TV and on, for example, other traditional media, we're not exactly guarding our people from getting this information from other ways. But what we are also saying is that by doing this, you're actually contributing to the decline of the traditional media. Why is it so, and why is it so important? Now the thing is, we see the shift from ad revenue because it's falling from year to year to the subscription model, so the serious media. The serious media who provide us with stuff like double checking the facts, the facts. Now, where reporters are fired for misreporting, unlike the people who just followed something on the Twitter and then you had rants for 8 hours. Did something happen? Didn't happen? And then you see that this is actually a photo from 80 years before, and nothing actually happened, and this thing was actually trending for like, well, some hours. We see that that is really bad. Now, we think that fundamentally for people to spend their money on something they can get there elsewhere, for example, social media for free, for example, for them to spend money on some journals or on some print media who went on the internet and now is on subscription model, they need to trust them. When we show that they do not report everything, that they are censoring something from us, we lose that trust. We don't trust them at all. And what we lose, except the double check and fire for misreporting, if we do not have media which has a lot of money gaining from the subscription model and stuff like that, we also lose this stuff like investigative journalism and stuff like that. We think that there is a tradition that is nurtured in all serious media, for example, like BBC or other printed media like, I don't know, Atlantic and stuff like that, where you have this tradition which goes from like one reporter to other and stuff like this, and they need money for this, and they need the trust of people to buy this and not get it from the free source of the social media. Why is it so bad that they get it from the social media? Now, on the social media you have intentional misreporting and unintentional misreporting. Intentional misreporting can be for fun, when you just share it because you think that this can get retweeted, whatever, no one cares, this is just internet, that's not the real world, and stuff like that, and people get terrified, and people don't know what is true, they don't get the information from their government, from their media and stuff like that. And you have unintentional reporting, because those people on social media are not reporters, they are not actually qualified to do this, they just shared what they saw and didn't interpret it in the right way. And this is why we do not want censorship, because we want our democracy to work, because we want our media to help us to do, and this is why essentially it is bad to censorship terrorism. Thank you very much.
We thank the speaker, and now we give the floor to the first whip speech in this debate. Here.
When the leader of the free world, Barack Obama, comes out and intentionally says that he is not saying that the terrorist attacks that are being committed are Islamic terrorist attacks, you have to understand that the impact the media has is enormous. You have to understand that the impact it has on the people and the perception of Islam and terrorism within society is extreme. 4 points of rebuttal. Firstly, on top half. Do people have the right to know? Okay? Does government have the right to limit their freedom to know in some cases? We believe yes, they do. Government already limits some information that is coming to us. Let's say, for example, trade negotiations, or things like contracts or other governmental military plans, right? Those are things that society should not know, because it is potentially problematic if they know that, because they can intervene in some way and change the good outcome that is going to happen for them, right? Also, we believe that government in itself has a mandate to make decisions for people. That is why it is elected, right? That is why we have democracy, go to elections and say, you are going to make those decisions for me, we trust you on that, right? Secondly, should people, even if people have the right to care, right? Is it practically beneficial? Okay? Is it good that people be scared like opposition arguments? We believe no, because when people are scared, they often don't take rational decisions, right? They take decisions that are related to their desire to have revenge on those people. When you are being told by the media that a radical Islamic terrorist freak has killed someone from your state, or even if this is someone close to you, then you have no incentive to empathize with them and understand the problem in its essence. You have an incentive to say, I want the worst possible punishment for that person, right? I want military interventions, I want to destroy all those people who are harming me and my society. Thirdly, later. Thirdly, why we're treating this differently than crime, right? Because this will openly tell you. We're treating this differently than crime because crime is not directly related to a certain religion, right? Crime does not in itself create discrimination within society on the basis of someone practicing a religion. This is why we're treating it differently. This is why I believe this is very important. And also, crime doesn't incentivize and give legitimacy to terrorist organizations, as Rumi tells you, as happening at the moment. Because when the media comes out and the narrative of the West is Islamic terrorism and Islamic extremism is awful, then you are giving an argument to organizations like ISIS to go to Iraq and Syria and say, well, see, the West is demonizing you. That means we have the us versus them narrative. You should be joining us because we are on your side. We are also Islamic. Fourthly, okay, people on social media, this is one sort of debate, right? Firstly, we're telling you we're limiting all of that, right? You can't post that sort of thing on social media because we're going to ban it. Like things like we're banning already Nazi symbols and stuff like that. But even if something leaks, right? Even in some situation, someone happens to be in the right place in the right time and takes a picture of that terrorist attack, we believe that the effect of that is a lot more marginal than what we get on the comparative on their side of the house when all of the media and all of the newspapers are saying these radical terrorists are all coming to kill us, right? And the impact is absolutely not compatible with comparison in any way, okay? Moving on to closing. What do closing tell us, okay? Media is marginal. The things that influence people's decisions are things like drones, right? People are more scared of drones. The thing is that drones come from the media. You wouldn't have drones in the Middle East, you wouldn't have military interventions or boots on the ground in the Middle East if people didn't want it, right? Because politicians appeal to the desires of people. If people want those military interventions, politicians are necessarily going to give them to them because they want the power, right? Because they want to be in the next government. That means that you don't have the drones without the media because the media is saying those people want to kill you, then the people are saying we have to do something about it, we have to have some type of reconciliation. Okay. Thirdly, in terms of the Boston Marathon and the militarization of police in that debate, okay, there was a debate. We don't think how fruitful it was, because ultimately you don't have any change in the US in terms of militarization of police. And secondly, it created this us versus them segregation in society narrative, where black people are always the ones that are being discriminated on the basis of one simple case, right? Let's look at Ferguson. Thirdly, in terms of economic sanctions, we don't get this idea about how economic sanctions or boots on the ground are going to necessarily improve the situation in those Middle Eastern countries. We don't get what that is a good thing on their side of the house. If you're limiting someone in their economy and reducing the standard of living of those people, you are actively giving them an incentive to join organizations like ISIS, where they will probably be paid, and because you are the bad guys that is hurting them, right? So, I'll take closing on first.
So how do you actually connect the media pressure with the drones? Is actually the CIA was operating the drones in the Yemen and we didn't know that for years.
Okay, could you repeat that?
We didn't know that CIA operated drones in Yemen for years and no one was informed of this. And people didn't know we are actually there by any means. How do you connect?
There are certain instances where you don't know, right? It just happens. The government has that ability and has that mandate to do that, as we told you. But in the cases where you do know, then you will support things like boots on the ground, things like military interventions that are a lot more dangerous than drones in the long term, right? Fourthly, let's talk about this idea of not trusting media at all. Why should we trust media? Absolutely, right? Because medias are often paid by private corporations. They have a certain right-winning, a right-leaning, or a left-leaning narrative that they are supporting. We should always think critically of what we are reading. We don't believe that is a bad thing. We believe it's better on our side of the house. So what does this debate come to? It comes to three main points. Firstly, is it good that we as people care about this? Can we influence it in any possible way? We say that the only impact we as individuals, as citizens, can have on this is we can make it worse. Why? Even if you know you are going to firstly panic because you are afraid about yourself, and secondly, you will want to have revenge upon those people, the people who are Islamists, the people who you believe are trying to come and to kill you. Secondly, do we get any practical benefits on their side of the house? Absolutely none. They tell us that on a principle level, it is wrong to limit information and people should be able to know, right? We disprove this by saying government already has the ability to limit some types of information, and it is good for the people because it ultimately leads to better practical benefits for them and for the citizens. And thirdly, in terms of legitimacy, where we bring in an extension, it is a huge problem that you're legitimizing Islamic terrorist organizations like ISIS when you're creating this narrative of us, the West, versus them, the East, the Islamists, in the media. Because ISIS can then go out and put their videos and show the people those newspapers and say, the West hates you. We are the people who are helping you. You should be joining us. Mr. Speaker, for all these reasons, extremely proud to propose a motion.
For the final remarks, and now we hand over the floor to the last speech of this debate. Here.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I'll jump directly to the position. So what was this debate mainly about? What we talked about is what is the influence of the media and whether or not in the status quo is beneficial or worse or harmful for the general society. What we got from we generally got two different plans from the outside government. On this first bench, we have this plan that the images are the problem of how people are afraid of these facts. We believe that that is truly not, completely not true. Primarily, the media is not the only source of information where we get these images, because those images generally derive on the internet. And we believe it is a lot more harmful in those situations for us not to have a clear system a clear source from where we can have respectful knowledge. And we believe it is a lot harmful and a lot more fearful for the citizens, and we believe that that is what they want to solve in the first government. It is a lot more fearful for those people to have such a situation. Because when you are, for instance, in Boston, and you wake up one morning, hear that there was a terrorist attack, and then all this news says is 25 people died, the police shot the terrorists, everything is okay now. You go onto the internet, and you're flooded by images of of dead bodies on the internet. You're not going to actually count the bodies and see, well, it's 25. You may come to the conclusion is, this seems a lot more than 25, because there are so many images, so many different people took these images, and now why should I believe exactly this media that what they are telling me is true? Because they are obviously hiding certain information, because they are too afraid to show us the clear picture. So we lose faith in this media. And my partner talked about this, and I'll talk a bit more about this, why we have to have faith in the media and how that is harmful for us. Furthermore, on second government, we get this different idea. How the media is to blame for our Islamophobia. Well, either that is another plan on how we're not going to state that ISIS committed a terrorist attack, and we're going to withhold information about who is committing these terrorist attacks, or we see no other way of this plan functioning. But let's see that it is true that we withhold information about who is committing these terrorist attacks. Generally, the problem with this is that those groups take claim on their own. The government isn't the one that stated that Al-Qaeda did the 9/11 bombings. They took claim. They wanted us to fear them. They stated this is what we did. So Islamophobia does not derive from the media. The media never says we should hate all Muslims. We create that Islamophobia on our own when ISIS beheads two reporters from Britain. We create that. That has nothing to do with the media. So that is why generally the government loses this debate. Now, on-side opposition, what exactly did we bring you? Why is this even more harmful? Because we believe that having an informed citizen is necessary in our current state, in our government, in the world we want to live in the West. We believe that it is necessary to have informed citizens. And how do we lose this when we do not have a clear picture of what is going on? They say that governments do have right not to tell you certain things. Well, I believe that there was recently a case when the government hid information from people, such as the fact that they are spying on their own people, and the people were not so satisfied with this. We need to have transparency in a process if we want to have a democratic society, if we want to have political accountability for the politicians themselves. How do we lose this? Because politicians, if the media is the one that reports on what it's doing, if it is not showing us the clear picture, and as I already showed you, why we lose faith in the media, we're not going to believe them, we're not going to believe what the media is stating, and we're not going to have less faith in when the politicians talk about these things. And secondly, we're leaving a lot more room for politicians to manipulate the people on what is actually happening. When we have political discussions in these situations, because we do not have a clear picture, we're allowing politicians to paint a clear picture for us, and because they are generally people who are good at doing that thing, and that's why they're politicians, because they are good at talking to the people, they can create images for you, and you are much more likely to believe those images, and politicians gain a lot more leeway on the people, which is also very detrimental for a political society. And lastly, how the fact that if we have no clear-cut media in which we can trust, we are going to be a lot more fearful of what is happening in the world. If we have no clear place where we can go and watch imagery of what is happening, if we have no newspaper that we can trust, they say like, currently we should be critical of the media because there's left-wing media and there's right-wing media. Yes, but there are professional medias that point out certain views and of the situation, and it is upon you to choose this. But if you don't choose either of these sides, all you're left with is the internet that has no checks and balance system of whether or not it is correct. Because if a media is false reporting on such matters, you will stop following it, and it is not in its interest to do so. While if you post false information on the internet, you have no harms. While you yourself have no harms, while you create terror and fear in the populace. So when you have this, no thank you. Actually, I'll take it because I don't know.
Okay, if you are saying that Islamophobia comes from people fearing ISIS, if people don't know the exact things that ISIS have done, do you concede that there will be less Islamophobia in general?
Well, I believe that we will fear everybody, and if ISIS posts a clip of it beheading someone, I'll still have Islamophobia because it's Islamic State, and I'm stereotyping. The media does not state all Muslims are doing this, it states ISIS. We do not believe that the media is calling upon hatred to Muslims. We believe that it is stating who is doing this, and we are the ones that are creating Islamophobia. So that has nothing to do with it. But so why is it necessary for us to have clear-cut media? Because the only area we can, if we stop trusting the media and we stop buying the newspapers and subscribing to The Guardian or some place of credibility, those medias will not have enough money to hire professional articles and give us the truth. And then the only location we have to find this information is exactly on the internet. That is not reliable. We do not know exactly what can happen. Someone can publish false information and we can act upon this, hindering our capability to live, because exactly that is the point. In certain situations, fear can completely control our lives. It is a lot better to have a place where we can filter the information that is, and for those reasons, we have to trust the media. So what exactly did we bring to you today on second opposition? We brought to you how high withholding information makes people lose trust into the media, how they increase their fear because they look in other areas that are not verified and are much more not filtered and are much more gruesome in these situations and fear for those situations even more. How the media is not to blame for Islamophobia. How this only allows government politicians to furthermore control the public, withholds other information that is also interesting for us, and destroys the purpose of democracy. For all these reasons, we beg you to oppose this.
We thank the speaker for the final remarks. Teams, please cross the floor, shake hands, and everybody, I guess, out.